If you're finally done with these sick habits such as watching pornography, smoking cigarettes, binge eating fast food, these habits that are absolutely destroying your mind and body, then you've come to the right place, because I promise you, this is going to be the last video you need to quit all of these habits. So make sure that you watch this video to the very end. You don't want to miss any of these tools. These tools work best when they work together. The approach that I'm going to show you now has worked for individuals who have been smoking 10 plus cigarettes a day, and those who have been addicted to pornography for 15 plus years. And all of them were able to quit these habits cold turkey. But before we get to the solution, you need to truly understand the problem. Why is it that these things are so addictive? And why is it that these things are so damn hard to quit? Because understanding the problem is half the solution. Smoking cigarettes, drinking alcohol, watching pornography, all these things have one thing in common. They all release a pleasure-inducing neurochemical called dopamine, and they release it in massive quantities. Also, it's so easy to obtain these things. Like, there is no barrier to entry towards these things. If you want to watch pornography, you want to watch 100 different naked women, they're all at the palm of your hand, a few clicks away. If you want to go and smoke cigarettes, if you want to drink alcohol, you can walk into your local store and get these things. There is no barrier to entry to get this massive amount of pleasure. But the problem is, after using these things for a long period of time, getting those massive amounts of dopamine hits, your brain gets used to it and it remembers these things. And this is why it makes you crave them. Your brain actually rewires itself to now become this dopamine seeking machine. And each time you stop supplying it with things that give it massive dopamine, it begins to crave them. You know that uncomfortable feeling when you're trying to stop something? That is your brain causing you to feel that way. 90% of the advice that you see online regarding quitting addiction is garbage, because it relies on raw motivation. And the truth is, raw motivation is a limited resource and it is bound to run out. Each time a craving hits you, it's going to chip away at your motivation levels, and eventually it's going to deplete them, and then you're going to relapse. Like, think about how many times you have actually decided to quit this thing but have eventually failed and relapsed. That's because you're using raw motivation, and you will always fail if you use raw motivation. You need something new, you need something different. And let's say hypothetically you even manage to stay away from these things for a couple of days and couple of weeks using raw motivation. It is then that your brain actually begins to recalibrate and rewire itself, begins to get healthy again. But when that happens, you experience a bunch of withdrawal symptoms. You feel depressed, you feel hopeless, you feel anxious, your mood is quite volatile, and you experience brain fog. And it is while experiencing all these symptoms that a person usually just relapses again. But what if I told you that there was a way that you would never experience cravings for these things ever again? Like, think about something you have never tried. It could be something like crystal meth or cocaine. Do you actually miss these things? The answer is no. That's because your brain has no memory of them, therefore it doesn't demand them. This is exactly how you're going to feel about the substances that you're currently addicted to. And what if there were no withdrawal symptoms involved? Like, you could actually quit all your addictions and bad habits without actually going through those crazy withdrawal symptoms. Think about how easy it would become to quit all these bad habits if you had no cravings and if you had no withdrawal symptoms. It would be like taking candy away from a baby. And this is exactly what fasting does. Whenever you go on a reasonably long fast, then you experience no cravings for these substances that release massive amounts of dopamine. When you have deprived your body of food for something around 15 to 18 hours, then your body begins to produce something called ketones. And these ketones are superfood for your brain. When you're actually deep into a fast, your body begins to eat itself. It begins to eat all the decaying toxic cells that are dysfunctional. And when your body actually gets rid of this junk, you begin to feel amazing. Fasting is like hitting the factory reset switch. Your brain begins to rewire itself to a state before it was addicted to these substances. And the best part is, this rewiring is super fast, and you do not experience any withdrawal symptoms during it. Like, 90% of the symptoms that you would experience are just gone or really dampened. So the very first thing that you need to do in order to quit any of these addictions is to go on fasts, 16 to 18 hour long fasts, to end the craving and to actually begin the process of rewiring and healing your brain. Like, you all know that one fat person who has been trying to lose weight for years, and this person loses a couple of pounds here and there, but eventually he just reverts back to his original form. He becomes obese once again. Why do you think that is? I want you to imagine that there's a rubber band placed between two of my fingers, and I keep stretching it and stretching it and stretching it. This represents all the effort and hard work that I'm putting, all the behavioral changes that I'm making, going to the gym, but eventually this band just snaps back. it snaps back to its original position. And this anchor actually represents your self-image. This anchor represents your identity. You see that obese person that keeps reverting back to his original condition? He or she actually believes that he is still an obese person. He still has the identity of an obese person, and they kind of know that the things that they're doing to change their circumstances are not natural to them. So it's almost like they're swimming against the tide. They're stretching the band and snapping back to their original identity. And this is the reason why people who have quit things for years and years still end up relapsing. It's because all this while their identities were still that of addicts trying to quit a certain behavior. All this while they were just swimming against the current, and all it took was just one bad day for them to snap back to what their self-image said they were. And this is why it is so important for you to change your identity. You need to change what you think of yourself. The very first thing that you need to do in order to recreate your self-image is to first understand your self-image. You need to understand what you think of yourself. For this, you need to sit down, self-reflect in the form of journaling and self-talk. Like literally sit down with a piece of paper and a pen and write down what do you think of yourself. And this shouldn't be some vague, woo-woo, superficial writing. No, literally stare into the depths of your soul and write down every grim detail of what you think of yourself. And this could be as long as you want it to be. And the more clearly you understand yourself, the easier it will be to recreate your self-image. Once you have actually written down all of these things, chances are you're going to spot a lot of limiting beliefs about yourself. You might have written down things like you are someone who has always been a loser in life. You are someone who no one loves and all your friends hate you and the world is out there to get you. And you're someone who sucks at math and you have never been a disciplined person and you can never ever quit smoking because you're too weak to quit smoking. All of these things are just limiting beliefs that have been hooked onto you at a very young age. And now they're just literally running your life. Your body is defaulting to these particular settings that you don't even know of, that most people do not know of. And in order to fix these limiting beliefs, you literally need to pretend that you are your own lawyer. You need to make a case for yourself. You need to actually question all of these limiting beliefs and tell yourself why they are not true, why they are inaccurate, why there is more context to this limiting belief, and you need to disprove them. You need to get out of these shackles of these limiting beliefs, because unless and until you change your self-image as a person, you are always going to snap back and relapse and always be addicted to that habit. Let me tell you a quick story. During the Vietnam War, a percentage of American soldiers were addicted to heroin. Now, people back in the United States were really worried that what's going to happen to these soldiers once they return back from the war. It's going to be incredibly hard for them to give up all these addictions. But turns out that 90% of the heroin addicted soldiers never touched heroin ever again once they returned back home. And that absolutely blew everyone's mind. And this changed everything we knew about addiction. This is because once their environment changed, so did their habits. That's because they were no longer in their previous environment, like in the war zone where there were gun firings, there was stress, there were other fellow soldiers who were taking heroin. All that changed. They were back in their homes, in the comfort of their families, in the comfort of their loved ones. They had never taken heroin in that environment. Therefore, their brain never required them to take heroin there. You see, your environment is filled with cues that trigger your habits. For example, you might be the kind of person who only smokes when he's there with a particular friend, and that friend is the cue to triggering the habit of smoking. Perhaps you're someone who's addicted to pornography, and the only time that you watch porn is when you're alone in your room and there's no one watching, the lights are turned off, you're lying in your bed and you're scrolling. Perhaps that is the cue that triggers your habit of pornography. So what you need to do is modify your environment. If you're someone who usually smokes in social gatherings, then you perhaps need to change the kind of people that you hang out with. Or if you're the kind of person who views pornography in a particular setting, in a particular room or in a particular place, then you need to modify that place. Perhaps change the orientation of a chair, change the orientation of a table, change what the curtains look like, change what the bed sheet looks like. Make that place appear to be different so that your brain does not remember these things as cues and trigger the habit once again. I know this sounds like a very minute change, but trust me, it's going to have a significant impact on your triggers. Every single behavior or every single activity that you do has an activation energy associated with it. Activation energy refers to the amount of effort required just to begin that thing. If the activation energy required for a thing is quite low, then you're more likely to do it. And if the activation energy required for a thing is large, then you're more likely to not do it. Because who wants to spend too much effort on anything, right? Human beings were designed to just pursue the paths of least resistance. And you can leverage this principle to your advantage. Make your bad habits super difficult to perform. Like if you're addicted to smoking, then have no cigarettes in your house. And tell one of your friends that, hey, I'm gonna pay you like $100 if you ever find me smoking. Make that behavior extremely difficult to perform. And if you're addicted to pornography, then have like a bunch of website blockers, ad blockers, password protect your phone, and keep it in the other room when it's close to bedtime. Increasing the amount of effort required to do a behavior will make that behavior far more difficult to perform. Like there are people who cannot go without smoking for 2-3 hours, but when these people are asked to travel in like a 14-15 hour long flight, they never pick up the cigarettes because the behavior is incredibly hard to perform and the environment is completely different, so they don't even crave smoking. If you would like to know more details about fasting, like how long to fast, when to fast, what to eat before a fast, what to eat after a fast, how do I recreate my self-image, how do I modify my environment, how do I make these behaviors more difficult, and if you would like more personalized attention, then make sure that you click the link in the description and book a free one-on-one call to discuss how I can help you achieve your goals.